Hey guys, welcome to WP Roundtable, episode 139. I've got a special guest with me today. His name is Mr. Chris Wallace of Lyft UX. How you doing today, Chris?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Pretty excited to chat with you.
Same here.
This fine evening, halfway through May. We were commenting earlier today, me and my colleagues, about how this year is just flying by. It feels like it just started. We're practically halfway done.
Absolutely.
Chris, you and I met about a month ago at Pressnomics for the first time.
Yep.
And got to know each other a little bit. Both did a talk at the end of the day and chatted. And since then, I've been really excited to just get to know you better and have you on the show. So we've got a lot to discuss, and I'm looking forward to getting the ball rolling here. Okay, first things first. Let's cover our quick picks of the week. At this point in the show, we just share something new and interesting that we've come across. It can be any old thing. And I feel like the last time I was on, I shared a Baremetrics blog post, and this is just another one that I really liked. Baremetrics shared the 67 tools and services we use to run our startup. Listicles can be pretty hit and miss, but this particular one was pretty well done, quite comprehensive, and introduced me to a considerable number of tools that I hadn't encountered before. Did you read the same post, Chris?
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And I had a lot of takeaways from it. And I spent a little while going through, like, what is that? Oh, what is that? That another successful company is using, and broken up by category, what they use for business, engineering, marketing,
Nice.
Customer success, and design. And it's always cool to see bigger companies using the same tools that you are and introducing you to new ones. So I recommend checking out that post.
Nice.
Chris, do you have anything to share with us today?
Absolutely, yeah. So actually, a friend of mine, Jeff Sheldon, who's in my mastermind group, just launched a Kickstarter today for a new desk organizer, or really an organizer for anything. It's kind of a cool, compact product that it's very modular. So all the little pieces kind of can connect together in different ways. And it all sits on kind of a grid system, which is really kind of unique. I've never really seen anything like that, but you kind of put this wood base down on your desk, and then you have like all these little components that kind of go into it. And so you can get like a little headphone holder, you can get a little coaster, you can get a sticky note, pad holder, all these little components that just kind of all fit together the way that you want it. And they actually just launched it this morning, and it already blew past the goal by, I think, like 3x at this point. So
Wow.
it's been live. I think it's been live for like 6 hours or something, and they've already like completely shattered the goal. And it's been on Uncrate and all this, all these different websites and stuff. So it's a pretty cool little product that you can back. That he actually only set a goal of like $18,000 or something like that initially. And with 59 days left, he's got quite a ways to go on his timeline. But I think he's going to shatter that goal pretty significantly.
Wow.
So pretty
That's
cool
amazing.
product if you want to check that out.
Yeah, how would somebody find that one?
It's actually on ugmonk.com/gather, I think is the URL, and it goes that goes straight to their Kickstarter page.
All right.
Pretty sweet little deal.
That's pretty cool. Have you ever done one of those Kickstarters before?
I've never done a Kickstarter myself. I mean, in terms of backing them, I've maybe backed a couple products. Some of them weren't on Kickstarter, but they were crowdfunded. I've never, put a product on Kickstarter or any sort of crowdfunding platform or anything like that. But my experience just in general with crowdfunded products has not been particularly great. Like I backed a smart watering controller for my lawn, and the product ended up not really working very well. And I backed, what did I back? Oh, I backed the Ether Cone, which was actually a Bluetooth speaker and Wi-Fi speaker that connected in with the service Rdio. If you're familiar with Rdio,
Sure.
which is no longer a thing, right? So that was kind of a bust as well. And so just in terms of like betting on the wrong horse. I've kind of bet on the wrong horse a couple of different times. I actually got the Pebble 2 watch. And then and then they got bought by Fitbit. And so, yeah, I'm kind of 0 for 3 in a way on the technology side. And so like, I'm trying to avoid the technology ones and stick with more of like the manufactured goods products. Because I feel like those are a little safer, because it's not like there's software that can somehow go out of date, which is kind of that was actually the problem that I had with all 3 of them. Was now their software either went out of date and then they stopped updating it, or they went out of business and then they stopped updating it. I mean, it's a software issue in most cases. So,
wow, that's pretty funny. Yeah. Cool. So let's talk about your background a little bit. Let's get to know you better, Chris.
Sure.
I want to unravel a little bit of your story, and we can take it in pieces. Let's start at the point where your career is not really even started yet. So you're a young Chris Wallace, but you have high expectations for your future, full of ambition.
I don't know about high expectations.
You believe you're going to do something with your life. Tell us about that time where you said, I'm Chris Wallace and I'm going to go out and I'm going to do this. And then what did you do?
Oh man, that's actually really good. So yeah, I kind of started out, I started like just messing around with like technology back when I was like 13, 14 years old. I may have downloaded a few pirated programs, like Dreamweaver, Photoshop, Fireworks, all the like macro media products and the Adobe products and stuff. Just I was a student, right? I was just, testing them out.
Sure. It was above board.
Right. So I was kind of just getting my feet wet and learning how to build websites, and just kind of having fun with all of it, like just learning technology and understanding software and how it does things, and how you can make things using technology, which was kind of mind blowing back then. I mean, this was like in the late 1990s, where we weren't really sure what we were going to be able to do with computers and design software and development and all that. And so, I started kind of getting into building websites, and people started to ask me, to actually build them real websites. And so I'm like, sure. Why not? Like I know how to do it, I guess. And so this was like
doing it for fun, really?
Yeah. Like I was just kind of just goofing off, and so I would build like a website for, I don't know, like, I guess it was really like the MySpace era, right? It was like you're building a personal website. It's just like music you like, stuff about you, completely ridiculous things, like nothing that you would ever want public again. Just because you, like when you're 13, 14, you're writing stuff that just makes no sense and you have no idea what you're talking about. So then anyway, fast forward to like a few years later, I'm in high school, I'm in, starting in college, and kind of getting to know some like local nonprofits and helping them with their websites as well. And I actually became a partner in an agency called Next Design Studios. And Next Design Studios was really interesting because it was a group of people that they all had different disciplines that they were good at. One was good at marketing, one was good at web development, and then I was good at design and kind of also front-end development. And so it wasn't a super serious thing. It was very casual, and like there was no formal like contract or anything like that in place. It was just us kind of trying to figure it out, right? And so we started doing websites for like charities, nonprofits, like literally like $500, right? Like we're not talking, huge amounts of money for big clients. It's very much on the side, kind of just, hey, you're going to pay us to kind of learn how to do this kind of. And so we started doing that, and that's when I started to make stuff that I was like, oh man, this is something I could get behind. I could get behind like doing this as a career. And so it kind of whet my appetite for being an entrepreneur, for going out and just kind of like finding cool projects to contribute to and take to the next level. It was super exciting to me. I don't know why, but I just was really intrigued by it all. And so I actually, I was at a Christian college, just doing general studies, trying to figure out what I should major in. I started majoring in youth ministry. And then I decided to kind of like change completely and go into graphic design. And so I left that Christian college and moved 3.5 hours away to basically go to a university, like a real big, state college, and essentially go join their graphic design program and try to figure out how to parlay that into more of a web design career, because web design programs didn't really exist fully. And so I started there and then ended up finding out that I had cancer in my first semester and had to literally put all of that to the side. I also found out that my girlfriend was pregnant with our first child, which we are now married and we have 3 kids. And so she actually got really sick. I got really sick, obviously, with having cancer. We ended up moving back to St. Louis, which is where we're from. Moved in with her mother-in-law and her brother in this tiny 2-bedroom apartment, and literally slept on like a pull-out couch together. Like that was all that was there, was this like couch. And so we slept on this pull-out couch. Eventually moved into a bigger place, but I had to have surgery. I had to go through chemotherapy. Then right after chemotherapy was over, we had our first child, and I had to figure out like, what am I going to do with my life at this point? Right? Like, how are we going to live, and where are we going to live? What am I going to do for a career? So kind of all of that hit me all at the same time with like concerns of like, how do I do this? And so I ended up going back to that, the first place, the Christian college that I was at, because my parents actually both worked there. I went back to them, and I basically, before I went through chemotherapy, I basically went to them and said, listen, like, all this stuff is happening right now. I have to go do chemotherapy. Would you guys be willing to promise me a job in exchange for me maybe like redesigning your website while I'm doing chemotherapy, and maybe work with you guys to kind of develop it out when I get back, when I get done? And they were like, you know what, like, that's actually a really great idea, because they didn't have anybody in that kind of a role. This was when, having dedicated website staff and designers and stuff wasn't really a big thing for this type of a company, this type of an organization. And so they were like, yeah, absolutely, come work for us. We'd love to have our website brought up to date and be more modern and stuff. And so I worked on it. I literally worked on the website while I was getting injected with chemotherapy drugs, which was like, at first it was fine. The first couple of weeks I was like, okay, yeah, this is going to work. This is fine. No big deal. So the first round of chemo was like pretty easy. Second round, I went back, and, that's when it starts to hit you like, man, this, like, they're basically like poisoning you. Right. So, super, super hard to actually focus on anything. They're pumping, saline into your body, really quickly to kind of get things moving. And so you're like literally getting up and going to the bathroom like 600 times. And so you can't really settle in and get into a rhythm. And so at a certain point I was just like, okay, I'm just going to just chill for a little while. And so I finished the chemotherapy, actually got to, feeling better, got to work, went into the office, and, it worked out really nicely. We actually got to live on campus there for a little while. And I had a job there. So that's kind of how I started, like, kind of the seeds were planted for me to be kind of an entrepreneur, right? Like, I had to figure things out on the fly and kind of just jump right into it. And so that's kind of what I did. Like, I just had to, like, there was no thinking about it. It was just like, you have to make a decision and just go for it. And so that's kind of informed my process in a lot of areas of my life, where a lot of people are kind of crippled by the ability to make a decision. I just try to make a decision and just stick with it and just move forward. And so that's kind of where I started with, like, how I became, kind of who I am today, I guess, in a lot of ways, even though that's been, 13 years ago at this point.
It's a really powerful story, Chris. There's a lot in there, and so many things that I'd love to probably dive into more. I'll have to be selective, I guess. Have you done other work outside of web and design? Because you've been doing this for a long time in various capacities.
Oh man, it's kind of funny. Not really. The last thing that I can think of that I did, I worked at a country club once. That was when I was a teenager.
Sure.
So other than that, not really. I mean, I was on camp teams at college, like when I was in college. So our college would send people out to these Christian camps, and you would like play music and all that kind of stuff. And like that was non-technical. But other than that, pretty much every other job I've had was I was a webmaster was my title at the Christian college that I was at, because they didn't know what to call me. They were like, "You're gonna go ahead and just be a webmaster." I was like, "Great, that sounds fairly inaccurate, but okay." But I designed print stuff. I designed the website. I wrote PHP. We wrote an application that basically kept track of all of the scores and the schedule for all of the sports at the college. That was my first like foray into PHP. There was no WordPress. I mean, there was, but it wasn't like a major thing at that point. And so I was like just kind of getting my feet wet in actual programming. And so we literally just wrote it in vanilla like PHP. I don't even think we did any like JavaScript or anything like that. It was just, here you go. And we actually built a content management system for the athletic director to then update those scores and the schedule and everything. Wow. So having done that, it wasn't just me. It was me and one of the other guys in our IT department. But having done that, it makes me appreciate things like WordPress, where it's like the things that you don't have to think about right now just didn't exist, back then. It was kind of like, spam was a problem, security, logging in to a system. Taking that for granted is very easy to do nowadays, because you just kind of assume, oh yeah, there's a library, or there's an app that does it already, and so back then it was like, this was like breaking new ground for us, at least, because we were like, man, we've never seen this before. Nobody taught us how to do it. We just kind of figured it out. And it's amazing how far we've come since then, even. So
yeah, it is. It's a recurring theme, conversations that I have with other people who have been doing this a while, like yourself. Like 13 years is a long time in just about any industry, but especially in this industry, right. That's so young and volatile, and a lot of changes occur quickly. So comments about how you guys don't know how good you have it back in my day.
Right.
Are always fun, and I'm sure you could come up with plenty more examples of the kinds of things that like we take for granted. A new person today, what sort of things would someone entering web development today, just diving in to become a WordPress developer or something, what would they take for granted?
Right. Yeah. And the other thing is, I know we talk about this a ton, but like all the build tools and all the things that you kind of have to know now, none of that really existed before. I mean, it was like, you just wrote the code and then it just did something. And then you were like, okay, great. Like you didn't write tests. You didn't have a build tool system where it actually, you wrote in one language and then it output to another language. Like that didn't make any sense, back then. Like, why would I do that? And verbosity was just accepted. It was just like, this is how you write it. This is what it looks like. This is how many lines it ends up being, how many characters it ends up being, whatever, no big deal. Nowadays they're like, oh, get rid of those semicolons, get rid of lines, just do indentations. Like what what are we doing? It's hard for somebody to just jump in and be like, oh yeah, this is how you do it. This is the right way to approach it, because there's just so many different ways that people do this now. So
there really is, and it is almost like the opposite point too, because on one hand we're making the point that someone jumping in today would get a lot of things for free that they take for granted, that back in our day, we had to do that. When I was writing PHP forms and stuff when I first started learning web development, oh my goodness, it was so much work, and it was so terrible. The end product was dangerous, and right. Now it's a snap. It's a couple clicks to make something elegant and sophisticated and secure. But you're making the opposite point too, that someone getting in today very likely could feel completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, you have to balance that complexity with smart, speed in development, right? Like you have to figure out, is it worth adding a dependency? And this is the age old like WordPress problem, right? Is like, talking about adding node as a dependency and all these things. It's like, yeah, but maybe let's not add that as a dependency and make it that much harder for somebody new to get into it. You can make that argument really for anything. It's hard to resist going there when man, this did 10x speed improvement on my project over here. Why can't we put it into this project and do the same thing for everybody, right? And I think that, that sounds really nice, but it also sounds like you're adding a whole lot of complexity or dependency on things that you probably don't need 100%.
I think you're right. Yeah. There's a lot to that. Things have gotten interesting these days, and web development is just, it's cool, but it is extremely complicated. There's a lot to this stuff these
Absolutely.
days. I have some people who come to our meetups or some other friends who see me working from home and enjoying my job. What a novel idea. And say, I don't like my job. Tell me more about this. And my first reaction is, oh yeah, there's nothing to it. But then actually when we begin to unpack it, to really be proficient at this and contribute to be employable. Yeah. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's important to know that specialization is probably, if you're just getting into something, I think specialization is probably the way to go initially, by really diving deep on one specific area, whether that's front-end development, back-end development, specifically CSS or SAS. I think if you're just getting into it, it's like, it's going to be way easier for you to learn this one slice of the web first, dig really deep on that, learn it as best you can, practice it for years, and then branch out. Because I started out kind of learning everything, because back in the day, like there was no specialization really. I mean, there were developers, but they kind of are.
The whole thing was a specialization.
Right. It was like, the internet. So you build it. But nowadays, like there are literally like specialists for every little tiny segment of the process of putting together a website, right? Yeah. And I would say like that's probably the biggest thing that I learned was I had to jump from thing to thing to thing to thing and learn it all, just because of my path in my career. Like I started as a designer, but I was also kind of relied upon as a front-end developer. And then I actually got a job where I was a front-end developer basically, and a designer at the same time. So I had to kind of stay in that lane, but then I shifted gears and became more of a JavaScript front-end developer. Like once you start thinking about not just CSS and HTML and you really start diving into the JavaScript side of things, that's a whole new world for people. Because I think going from nothing to learning HTML and CSS is fairly easy, right? I think it's easy to understand, okay, you have to build pages semantically. You have to write rules that then display those pages appropriately, based on whatever design you're doing. And then from there, you're like, okay, now we're throwing in this whole language into the mix that has its own set of possibilities and syntax and security concerns and things you have to know, like build tools come into play, different languages around JavaScript, different languages that have branched off of JavaScript. So it's like really digging in deep on each one of those is extremely difficult. And it does take years to really master them. And so I would say if you can, master one of them first and then start kind of diving into the other ones as you can.
I think that's good advice. Yeah, definitely. They will likely increase one's opportunities for employment and getting yourself into a position where you're applying that specialty and real projects, which is,
right.
is in many cases, a solid requirement for really mastering any craft.
Well, and typically, I will say this from a hiring manager perspective, typically hiring managers are going to look for somebody with specific knowledge of one specific language, right? Or one specific area like front end.
Often, yes.
And you can actually make quite a bit more money going after those specialized roles because it's so hard to find good people that know those inside and out. People that literally could tell you the history of JavaScript, ECMAScript. You know what I mean? Like finding that type of person is very difficult because you get a lot of surface level learners. You get a lot of people that are like, well, I've learned enough to be proficient, you know, in this language. Now I'm going to move on to the next one. I want to learn.
I can make a jQuery carousel or something like that.
Right. Absolutely. And I think it was probably my third job. So I worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car as a front end developer. So that job, I was pretty heavily involved in JavaScript development. And to that point, I hadn't done a whole lot of JavaScript development. So I went in there assuming, oh, front end development, that means I'm going to be doing a whole lot of HTML, CSS. I was dead wrong, right? Like I got in there and the first person that was kind of over me, that was like my mentor, essentially kind of showing me the ropes, showing me their pattern libraries. And like they had their own set of, this is what our jQuery looks like. You know, they've got their own library where these are things that we've built that we've needed over the years. And so these are reusable components that we just kind of created a library for. And here we go. You know, this is for you to use. And I jumped in there and I was like, I don't even know what does dot prototype mean? What are you even doing? Like I had no idea. And so I had to learn JavaScript basically from the ground up there. And that was really difficult. It took a long time to really get it to sink in for me. And then eventually I did, you know, I mean, obviously like at that job, you know, I wasn't ever like the master over anybody else. I was always learning from the people that were above me, that had been there a long time, that had studied JavaScript much more deeply than I had. And so I just kind of soaked all of it in because I knew that while I was there, I knew that I was never going to be better than anybody else at it. So I had to just learn everything I could and just soak it in. And so I try to do that. At least every role that I've been in, I try to learn something in that role that I'm not a master at.
Sure. So let's catch up to today. Tell us a little bit about how you founded or co-founded Lift UX and what the company does. Let's start there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've been running Lift UX for about 7 years now at this point. It's me and Brad Miller. I don't know if you met him at Pressnomics, but Brad's a great guy. We've known each other since we actually worked together at my second real job, which was at Network Solutions back in the day. Yeah. And with a funny story behind that, I think I told this on the Matt report, but the funny story about that was we worked together, we played foosball together, and then we both left the company at some point and worked for other companies in St. Louis. And at some point, Brad got this idea that he wanted to start a UX company and started kind of emailing well-known kind of people in the industry kind of around St. Louis, kind of in the area, I guess. And so I get an email one day and he's like, hey, my name is Brad Miller. I'm looking for connecting with people and just seeing if we can maybe start a UX company. I'm really interested in this area. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I was like, I know this guy, from back in the day. We weren't super close, but we played foosball together and all that. So like, I was like, oh, he probably just remembered me from there. And so I went back and I was like emailing back and forth with him. I was like, dude, we worked together at Monster Commerce and Network Solutions. Monster Commerce was the company before it got bought by Network Solutions. And he was like, oh yeah. He's like, we played foosball together because he didn't remember at first. And so we started talking and it turns out, I'd been kind of freelancing for a little while. I built some WordPress themes that got released on like Smashing Magazine and a blog called 6 Revisions. And they had kind of blown up a little bit, which they were just free like WordPress themes. We just put them out there and people just started using them. And once I put them out on blogs, like popular design blogs, they got really big, really fast. And so that actually kind of fed into our product business, which we started Up Themes about, I want to say 3 or 4 months after we started Lift UX formally, and took some of those themes that I had produced previously and just rolled those into Up Themes, created a few more themes, launched the company, and we had kind of both a WordPress theme product business and also a consulting business. And from that point, the consulting business kind of took off more than the theme business. And so we focused pretty heavily on that. And so we've grown it, obviously, to this day, pretty heavily invested in that. But we've also launched a couple other products along the way. RemoteJobs.com, which is what it sounds like. It's a remote job site. And then also a little church website builder, multi-site called FaithMade. And so that's basically a platform that was born out of, we have a lot of churches and a lot of nonprofits that come to us and they want help. And we always want to help them, but we kind of take on larger budget projects, kind of from the $25,000 and up range. And usually they come to us with budgets that aren't quite there. And so we always feel bad turning them away. And so it's like, well, why don't we build a product that kind of systematizes that whole process and is easy to get them up and running. And so that's where FaithMade came from. And so we have quite a few clients. Actually, my church is actually on the platform as well. And it uses like Ninja Forms. It uses Give, WP. It uses actually some of the GoDaddy themes. We built a series of themes for GoDaddy, and we actually kind of ported those over to use those on FaithMade as well.
That's pretty cool. So explain to us just a quick summary. What is Lift UX? Who do you serve, and what services do you provide?
Yeah. So Lift, primarily we started as a user experience design company. From there, we actually started getting into designing and developing blogs and like publishing sites. So when I say blogs, I don't mean like, my mom has a food blog or something, like big blogs. So the Next Web was one of our big customers early on. They have a network of sites that are tech focused in nature. So kind of like a TechCrunch type site. And we also did one of our very first projects was for John Saddington, who joined up with Tom McFarlane and all those guys. And so we did a project for them called churchcrunch.com, and they did a whole series of blogs in a multi-site there. And so we kind of became known for like UX plus WordPress and publishing. And so that's a lot of what we do today. We've done quite a bit with media and television as well. And so we got into media-oriented sites. I want to say in like 2011, approximately. We started working with AMC networks, and we did some work on The Walking Dead, Breaking Bad. We worked with WeTV, IFC. We did a major redesign of IFC.com, SundanceTV.com. And just from there is just kind of, we've worked on that type of stuff for a long time since. They've been a long time client for us.
What's the team look like right now? You distributed? Many in St. Louis?
So yeah, we're 100% distributed. We actually work with a network of contractors and full-time employees. Right now, our team is actually 4, and we have some contractors that we reach out to pretty regularly that are designers, developers, front-enders, whoever we kind of feel like, oh man, that's a good fit to pull this person in for this project. We try to reach out and pull contractors in. It's kind of what Carl Smith, formerly of EngineWorks, would call the jellyfish model, which it's kind of like everybody's kind of independent, right? But they all come together when they are needed on a project or something like that. So that's kind of how we're operating today. Works pretty well for us.
Yeah. So here's a question for you.
Sure.
The glory days of the WordPress-oriented agency, are they behind us? Is it right now, or is it in the future? What do you think?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there's always a need for agencies. I think that what you end up having with bigger companies is you end up with a very deep organizational structure that is no longer able to effectively ideate and be creative and execute on projects as well as they should be able to. And so what ends up happening is kind of cyclical, right? Like you have money being poured into agencies and external teams that come together, and freelancers especially too, that come together and join up with the team for a short period of time to work on one specific project and kind of do everything they can to make it a success, right? And I feel like there's kind of a cyclical nature to it. It's not one of those things where agency work like kind of goes up and then just goes back down, and continues to keep going down. I think every couple of years it kind of rises back up. It's kind of on a curve, right? It's like always kind of changing places, right? You've always got companies that maybe they go through a series of layoffs and they've laid off this team that maybe they thought they needed this huge team to execute on digital work, but it turns out they weren't producing the work that they needed. And so they realize, you know what, we could just have outsourced this for $400,000 rather than paying this team $1 million. And we would have actually gotten a much better product in the end. And so you kind of go through periods like that, especially with publicly traded companies who they're always trying to cut expenses and shift money around and make things look different on paper. So there's kind of that cycle of like going up and down over a period of multiple years. And so you kind of see, like this year, we've actually seen a huge uptick in project inquiries. Whereas at the end of last year, we actually had a pretty serious like fall off or drop off in inquiries. And so it's very much, you have to ride the waves when they come in. And when they come in, it's actually really good. Like there's really good work out there and there's really interesting projects. And so it's important to take those projects on and do a great job. And then when there's kind of some downtime, because our team's so small, we can kind of ride that wave a little bit easier than some of the bigger teams at times that may not have the sales or marketing cycles to support the dry spells. And they may have to lay off, team members or whatever. We don't really have to do that as much just because we don't really follow that same growth model. Being with, kind of pull in contractors, pull in full timers when it really hurts. It's kind of a just in time hiring model. So.
Sure. It's interesting. Yeah, you've been doing this for a while, and especially as someone who has been working on the web since webmaster was a common title, and since before user experience agencies were really a common thing. You definitely have some perspective looking at how the industry has changed. Maybe if you don't mind sharing a little bit of your reflections on what's some of like kind of the big challenges, what's really crazy about running a digital agency right now, especially as you look back on how things have changed. Is this a saturated market? Is it super complex? Is it hard to hire in? Are the prices ridiculous? Client expectations wrong? What's really tough about an agency right now?
That's a good question. I think probably for me is it's really difficult for an agency to maintain its focus on its culture and its long-term goals because it's easy to kind of chase the money and chase the dollars that clients are kind of throwing at you, in terms of, well, we've got this project in, do we really want it? Does it fit who we are? A lot of times people will just say, you know what, we need the project, so let's just bid it and maybe undercut the budget or bid what we think they'll accept, right? Like throw a number at it and say, this is what we'll do it for because we're hoping that that's what you want to pay for it.
Right.
And I think the danger with that is obviously if you undercut a budget significantly and you're not able to actually do the work, or do it in a way that makes you proud of your output. That really undercuts who you are as a company and what you set out to do when you first started it. I mean, nobody starts a company and says, I guess maybe some people do, but most people don't start a company saying, I really just want to make a lot of money, swindle some people out of their, their checkbooks, and, just kind of float through life. You know what I mean? Like nobody looks at it that way. Right. So I think the big thing is just making sure like you're sticking to your values in the projects that you take on, because ultimately the projects that you work on and produce speak to who you are as a team. And I think that's really important to just make sure that you have a criteria for what a successful or good looking project is. For example, at Lyft UX, we love projects that align with our values. For the most part, our team is a pretty strong faith-based team. And so a lot of the values that we have align with those cultural, those cultural norms that we've kind of grown accustomed to. And a lot of that is just normal stuff like honesty, integrity, like being a good person, communicating effectively, just all of that stuff that kind of factors in. And as long as we can meet those goals, take on product or projects that we feel like we can do a good job with, that the total sum of our two teams, us coming together with the client and working on this project, we want to feel like the total sum of us together is greater than what they could have done on their own. And so as long as we can do that, we typically will consider a project pretty heavily. And obviously there has to be some understanding of typical common courtesies of like engagement with clients, like communicate well with us, make sure to make time for meetings, or don't go into radio silence mode halfway through the project, just common courtesy. As long as you can kind of agree to that with most clients, like and where they're actually contributing and they're taking it seriously, they didn't just like shove it off to you and say good luck. Typically a project can be pretty successful for both sides.
Yeah. So these are some of the things that are really nice about a small agency, is you can maintain those kinds of things. Culture can be hard to scale, and values as company side expands and overheads increase, and you lose some of your ability to be selective and flexible with your the path that you're taking as a business. Do you guys intend to remain controlled small size strategically? Is that a part of your plan, or is this an agency that you would like to try and scale to a larger team over time?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. We've always approached it to this date. We've kind of approached it as we'll see what happens. It's kind of like with a just-in-time hiring model. They say hire when it hurts, right? Like we generally don't go out and chase a lot of RFPs. We do submit RFPs for certain projects that we want pretty badly. But we don't have a sales cycle or a sales team necessarily where we go out and we just hit everybody that we can. We generally bring in work organically and work on things that are important to us. And so as long as we're doing that, I think that's the most important thing for us, is just sticking to like I was saying, the types of projects that we feel comfortable with and not trying to expand too far outside of that. A good example is we actually had a couple different projects come to us that needed a whole lot of like print and video work. And that's not really something that we do a lot of, so we have friends in the industry and partners that we've, connected with that can do that type of stuff. But as an overall like marketing firm type approach, we don't really offer that. We're very, very digital in nature. We build apps, we do WordPress, we design, user experience design, even customer experience design type stuff, like product design. all of that is kind of within our lane. And when you get outside of that, the trouble is, even if you're passionate about the cause, the trouble is pitching it to a client and then also bringing all the people together that have to do that project, if it's outside of your comfort zone or outside of areas that you're used to, is very difficult to pull off, even if you can sell the project to the client. And so sometimes it's not even worth going through the process of selling the project to the client if it's going to take you so much time and effort to actually, bring it all together and make it work. You may be kind of working against yourself in a way. And so, we've kind of learned that the hard way is like, we've maybe bid on a couple projects where it was like, we believed in the mission and that's why we bid on it. But at the same time, like we have to stay true to us. And there's no, coming back to your original question, there's no way to grow quickly just by taking on the wrong projects, because ultimately you'll end up changing the identity of the company. And so, that's something that was pretty important to me. That was pretty important to Brad. And so we've tried to stay pretty organic with our approach. And, who knows if that'll change from here, but it's just something that is where we, where we've kind of gone in the past 7 years with Lyft.
These are a lot of cool things, and you're making me miss agency life. This is just not right.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, to some degree, there really is a lot to be said for running a digital agency these days. I mean, we're talking here about privileges that so many other industries do not get to appreciate. This level of control and flexibility that we talk about, the fact that you can discuss your values and have such an influence over the projects that you take on, these projects that are fun and exciting and fulfilling, and you can just influence the direction that your business goes and be selective and do things that have a big impact. That's quite a privilege to be able to do that sort of thing. Absolutely. And it makes like running a digital agency kind of attractive.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you focus on the dollars, it makes it very difficult, right? But when you focus on the values, sure, there's a slower growth curve, but it also attracts the people that you want to work with in the first place, right? So, for us, like we got to work on an app, that we're actually passionate about, which is super cool. Because then we can take that work, show it to other people who are doing stuff that's in a similar vein as the app that we designed, and we can show it to them and say, look what we did for this, this organization. And then they get to, kind of get excited about that. And then they bring us a project and they're like, we want to do something, obviously not the same app, but we want to do something that is kind of in the same realm, right? Like we're looking to do this type of work. And so for us, like, those case studies are so important. And, it's important to only work on the things that you care about, because if you have a whole bunch of work that you don't even want to show to people and is not the type of work that you want to continue to go out and get, you're just wasting a whole bunch of time. And I understand when you're first getting started, that's a whole different thing. Sometimes you just have to take projects that you may not like, but what ends up happening is, if you keep doing that over time, there's this thing called margin, right? And if you erase the margin, if you don't have any margin in your life, you're not going to be able to do the things you actually want to do. You'll be doing the things that you don't want to do, that you might hate or, are just a waste of your time. And we're only on the earth for a certain amount of time, right? So like, it's important to give yourself that margin back. And if you don't do that, then you're going to end up running yourself into a situation where you're just like, I hate my job, I hate what I'm doing. I just need to get out of it and start fresh, right? And everybody's been there at that point. I've been there. I don't know if you've been there, but it's a common thing where you're just kind of like sitting there going, how did I get here? And it's just a series of small decisions over time that leads you down a path you don't want to be on. And if you can learn how to make the correct decision and go down the path that you want to go by sticking to your values, I think that's the most important thing for people is make sure you're being true to your values and making decisions that actually align with them and follow them. And so I think that's like extremely important for people just starting out to hear, is like, make sure that you know your values, because if you don't know them, then you won't figure it out for a long time what you don't value, right? And then you'll be kind of stuck, which sucks.
You're absolutely right. Let's talk personal a little bit, Chris.
Sure.
You've got a family, 3 kids.
Yes.
I understand homeschooling is a part of your life.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. I was homeschooled, all my younger siblings too. It's a big part of my social circle, and a lot of other people that I know in the WordPress community as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, so I can't take much credit for it because my wife does most of the teaching, pretty much all the teaching. I have tried to get my kids into the computer, and I actually built like this little small recording studio here in my office, because my daughter's a singer. My son actually really likes producing music. And so I want them to kind of just get into their creative, mindset and learn how to produce music or record music. I've got all this, gear over here, for recording. I've got this guitar back behind me. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we like to just kind of produce music, and we have little contests where my daughter, who's 12, challenges my son, who's 10, to basically produce the best song. And so we've kind of had this like little competition going on between the two of them, and it's actually produced some really cool results. And so that's the kind of stuff that I love about it, is they actually have what I was just talking about, margin to be creative. They don't have to go to school, sit through a whole bunch of, lectures or do a bunch of homework. I mean, obviously they do have work that they're doing, but they're not spending their whole life doing monotonous work that they don't really, that they're not really passionate about. Sure. And so being homeschooled, it kind of allows us to tailor their education to what they're interested in, to what we think is a little bit more important, maybe like focus a little less on some things and really focus in on other things that we feel are beneficial to them long term. So I think it's great. I think that they've learned a whole lot more being at home and being homeschooled than when our daughter was actually in school. So yeah, I'm a huge fan.
That's remarkable. Well, obviously I am too. Big fan. Pretty cool. What are some of the other things that you and your family like to do when you're not working?
It's a great question, man. Being in Texas barbecue, pretty passionate about barbecue. So we went down to, me and my wife went down to Austin I guess a week and a half ago. No, 2 weeks ago now. And we just went down there, ate some barbecue, stayed at this nice little resort on the lake down there. We've got a local barbecue place that is absolutely phenomenal. And so I have to compare it to Austin barbecue, which is supposed to be, the best. And I haven't had Franklin. I haven't had La Barbecue, two of the places that they say are the best. I haven't had them yet. I did go to a place called Micklethwaite, which was really good, but it didn't really compare to Hutchins, my home barbecue. So, but I'm pretty passionate about that type of stuff. I love coffee. Really, I think I probably should live in Austin because coffee and barbecue are kind of that's like an Austin thing. But being in Dallas, it's nice because it's only 3 hours away. So.
Sure. Yeah. So we were at Pressnomics together about a month ago. Yes. Was that your first time attending the event?
No. So that was actually my third time. I went to the very first one, the second one, I think, and then this most recent one. I think I skipped 2 years in there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's
a great event. All
things considered, yeah, it was really great. Any particularly noteworthy takeaways or fun experiences from this time?
That's always interesting because for me, I tend to get more out of the hallway conversations. I know everybody says that probably. Not to, not to disparage the speakers in any way. They were great, great speakers. But for me, like, I tend to really dive deep in conversation with people and get to know people really well and build relationship through those hallway conversations and going out to eat with people and the after parties and all that stuff. Like, I just love meeting people that are doing cool stuff, especially with WordPress. It's like, how often do you have the chance to work with a piece of software that then provides you with kind of a whole business model, right? Like, that just doesn't happen. If you talk to just normal people that have no idea what software, like the software industry really is or anything like that, like, people look at it as magic, right? And so it's really cool because, like, I'm sure you have family or friends that are outside of that whole space and they're just like, I don't know what you do, but I know you get to work from home and I know you make decent money. Like, that's awesome, and I feel like super passionate about helping other people realize that. I actually had a friend from college who she was looking for a new job or a new career even. And I posted a job listing from remotejobs.com on my Facebook, and she commented on there like, hey, what would be the best way for me to learn the basics of HTML and CSS? And I was like, that's actually really interesting. She's a mom. She has like 5 kids or something, 6 kids or something like that. And she had never coded a line in her life. And she all of a sudden is realizing this is something that I could do from home. I could make good money and I would be extremely employable,
Yes.
being able to do this. And so she literally went out and found these courses online. I don't know if it was like Treehouse or Code Academy or something, but she started learning how to code just like immediately. And I was like, that's awesome. I love seeing initiative like that. And I love helping people connect with others who are already established and saying, hey, I need help. I need more people to help build the internet, right? I love connecting people I know to careers where they have the ultimate flexibility, right? It's a super cool thing. So.
Yeah. Oh man, inspiring. And I'm totally with you. It is a pretty exciting thing to witness and help people out with. So when it comes to your calendar, I'm curious, like, besides Pressnomics, what other kinds of events might people bump into over the coming year?
That's a great question. To be honest, I don't have anything with like a Sharpie outline around it right now. I want to get to WordCamp US just because it's in Nashville. I went to the first one in Philly. That was awesome because I got to do Independence Hall and all that. But I really want to get to the one in Nashville just because it's Nashville. Nashville's awesome. Hoping to get to that. I really want to get to Post Status Publish. I think that's in early August.
Yep.
So hopefully I can hit those 2 events at some point.
Those are good choices. You wouldn't be doing yourself a disservice by hitting both of those.
Right. Absolutely.
Awesome. Let's see. So we're winding down here a little bit. Do you have any good suggestions for people that I might invite on the show as a guest in the future?
Oh man, that is a great question. Well, I guess here's my problem. I don't know who all you've had on here. So that's a tough one. I would tell you this though. If you have the chance to invite Anthony Garand, who is one of our team members at Lyft. He is a front-end developer, and he is phenomenal at what he does. I think he would actually be a perfect fit because he has a very deep knowledge of design systems, componentized, UI systems and stuff like that. I think he could really bring some knowledge around all that.
Yeah. Good suggestion. I appreciate that. And an introduction would be welcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're pretty much winding down our time here. So Chris, I'll give you a chance to share any kind of parting thoughts, anything that's on your mind, or if there's something you'd like to pitch that is topical at this point, and how people might get in touch with you if they're so inclined.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know if I have anything to pitch necessarily other than if you want some really great coffee, I have some really great recommendations for you.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, no, definitely check out Cuvée Coffee, one of my favorite roasters. They're based in Austin. You can look it up. It's Cuvee. So yeah, definitely check that out. I love brewing some Cuvée coffee. It's great. But yeah, I mean, if you have any questions for me or want to get in touch, I am at Chris Wallace on Twitter. I am not the Fox News Chris Wallace. I do get a lot of tweets and emails through my website, but my website's actually chriswallace.blog. And so you can contact me through that as well.
There you go. Well, much appreciated, Chris. It's been totally awesome getting to chat with you, learning a little bit more about your story. I loved the discussion about agency life. There's just so much there. This is a pretty solid chat, and we barely scratched the surface of the topics that we wanted to. But hey, that's life.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and I look forward to bumping into you at another event in the future. But
Same.
in the meantime, keep it real.
All righty.